Welcome to the Tough Decisions Daily Show with your hosts, Dan and Danae Hanford. As entrepreneurs and real estate investors, we are faced with tough decisions on a daily basis. These tough decisions can either make us or break us. On this show, you will hear from highly successful people sharing their stories behind tough decisions that they have had to make along their journey of success. In every episode, you will be able to learn from the thought processes behind the tough decisions that were made. Some of these decisions will have amazing outcomes and some not so much. So without further ado, your hosts, Dan and Danae.
On the podcast with us today is Mark Kenney. Mark is a seasoned real estate investor, educator, best-selling author, and founder of Think Multifamily. Mark started his apartment investing career over 20 years ago, and he has a passion to be able to help others succeed in the multifamily arena and to be able to go big fast. Mark has invested in over 2,700 units and has a top-notch reputation among the multifamily investing community for providing exceptional value to investors and the community while being easy to work with. Welcome to the podcast, Mark.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Hi, Mark. Wanted to have you get us started here on the podcast with just a little bit of your background and how you got into the multifamily space. Kind of share with us a little bit of your story.
Sure. I grew up in Michigan, one of 7 kids. I have an identical twin brother as well. And we grew up pretty much, we had food and we had a place to live, which is a lot more than other people, but that was about it. Anything extra we wanted or even needed, we kind of bought ourselves at a pretty young age. And I grew up saying that I don't want my kids to have to go through the same thing that I was going through. So pretty young, I was 21 when I made my first offer on, it was just a duplex at the time. It got accepted. I was still in college at the time. And then my dad talked me out of it. And which kind of hurt, I felt kind of bad going under contract like that and then in backing out. But my dad kind of freaked me out about it. So I ended up terminating the contract. But a few months later, I actually got another deal. Didn't tell my dad about it. I closed on it and then told my dad after I closed on it. And the main reason for me, nobody really was influenced me about going to real estate or anything like that, but it just made a lot of sense to me. People need a place to live. Kind of analytical. I was CPA, IT consulting for a while and started buying smaller properties. I mentioned pretty young and then started my own IT company 2008 and did decent with that. And then about 4.5 years ago, started buying larger multifamily properties. And that's when I started also syndicating, which just means I was bringing other people in to invest alongside me as well.
Well, I'm sure along this process, back, when you first had your first contract there, that was definitely a tough decision. And, that was kind of an interesting spin on the tough decision because it was a tough decision that you made, but you really didn't want to make that decision. But your dad kind of pushed you into making that decision of trying to back out of that first deal. And of course, the next decision you had there was making a tough decision on not telling your dad so that he wouldn't talk you out of it again.
That's exactly right. And, looking back at it, I remember exactly where I was sitting. I know what restaurant I was. I know what booth I was, you're talking over 25 years ago now. And it stuck with me because, I started thinking that, my dad's never bought an apartment.
That's very true.
And he's 81 now and he still has never bought an apartment complex. So looking back at it, I'm like, I'm probably listening to the wrong guy. And just started. A great guy. He was trying to do it, I think, in his mind to protect me. But I kind of concluded whether it was houses, cars, or anything else that you were going to buy, if it wasn't 50% off, my dad thought it was a bad deal. And that's not reality. Reality is you can have a win-win deal and seller be happy, the buyer be happy, and still win-win.
And it's interesting because you hit on something there that you have to make sure you're listening to the right people. And sometimes the people that are discouraging you from doing something aren't discouraging you from doing something because they're jealous or because they don't want you to succeed. They have your best interest at heart, but it's just outside of their normal wheelhouse. And they aren't ones that are willing to take the risk to actually take themselves to the next level. And so they're trying to play it safe and they're trying to protect you. And I think that's what was happening there with your dad as well.
Without a doubt, that's a great way to summarize it. That's what was happening, and he definitely was trying to protect me.
So share with us, obviously in investing in real estate, there's a lot of tough decisions that go into play here. And so I'm sure you can share for hours and hours various tough decisions, but what would you say is one that really sticks out in your mind of a tough decision that you made that really didn't have the outcome that you were expecting, that you made the decision, but at the end of the day, it just really didn't turn out the way you wanted?
Yeah, well, the decision initially wasn't tough, but it turned out to be tough. So I have a partner in a deal in Atlanta that, without going into all the details really with him, I really didn't do what he should be doing. Let's just say that. And we fortunately had a board of directors with 5 members, and he was one of the 5, but we were able to remove him. And, that deal hasn't worked out the way it should work out in my mind, or the way it should even work out in reality. But I have really discovered that most of the problems that I've run into have been nothing to do with the property themselves or anything along those lines. They've been all around, potentially people issues and people not doing what they should do, as an example. We partner all the time. We have a lot of great stories as well, but that one was a lesson learned. And having the board of directors in that case did give us the option to remove him. We removed him, started removing him within 2 months. So we took quick action, but he did cause some damage to the property, and frankly, damage to my reputation because of what he did. Because if you're going to partner with somebody, I know this well because I was a twin brother. So anything my twin brother did, if he did something wrong, it was Mark and Mike. We both did something wrong, and that's the same way when you're going to partner with somebody. You better realize that the reputation, good or bad, is going to rub off on you, and people will perceive you in the marketplace based on your partners that you have.
And what kind of a lesson would you be able to pull out of that situation that you went through? What was the biggest takeaway that you had from that situation? Because obviously, you learned a lot of lessons, but what were some of those big lessons that you learned?
The biggest one on that one, some people do this as a practice. They'll buy an existing LLC. So they won't create a new LLC when they do get the property. And there's reasons why you might do that. In this particular case, my old partner actually already owned the property, and I bought out one of his partners and brought in some other investors to do so. Biggest lesson learned on that is I would never in my entire life ever again buy an existing LLC, because what happens in that case, you could have 1,000 good stories, but my story is not good. And issues that were present, unknown, undisclosed, not disclosed and things like that, but issues that were present that arose after the fact became my issues, even though they had started in well before I even got involved in the project. So you're talking 8 months before some things that came up and never disclosed, and never, there's a lot more to the story. But the fact is, the LLC is the one that has those issues. So once he was removed, those issues became my issues. And that's just the way it works when you do it. So I would never buy an existing LLC for any reason. People do it for tax reasons too, for property taxes. But again, I personally would never go down that route again.
And so it sounds to me like you thankfully had some things in place that you could take somebody out. But with that particular deal and the way it went down, did your investors lose money on that deal as well? And that's kind of how your reputation got hurt? Yeah,
they haven't yet. But yeah, I mean, it's not the property itself from a value perspective is not bad. It really isn't. It's a big, huge rehab project. But the problem is there were things from the past, if you want to say, liens that came up way after the fact that never were recorded on the books, for example, and things like that. So it hasn't happened yet, but the project's not. We own a lot of units. This particular deal has not turned out the way we want to yet, and it's unfortunate.
So let's shift gears here a little bit, out of the doldrums, if you will, and then talk a little bit more about some more positive things. So talk to us about a tough decision that you made, and either this tough decision was a decision that you made and it had an extremely positive outcome that you weren't expecting, or just, it was the right decision.
Yeah, I mean, we made a tough decision. We were part of another group at one point in time, and, things are easier sometimes when you're part of a group because, the person in the group they don't have to work as hard, right? Because the processes are in place and the group's in place and things like that. But there were some things we didn't like going on in this particular group. So my wife, Tamil, and I made a decision to leave the group. We left the group in the middle of a $4.8 million raise on a property, but we raised the money. That's how we started to think multifamily. And not only were we, continuing to buy properties, we also started an educational group as a result of that. So very tough decision going through it, very painful. But then looking back on it, no doubt in our mind, it was the right decision. And now we're able to help other people that are buying, multifamily. We do events and things like that. And that never would have started if we never made that decision to leave that group.
And one of the things that I see, which, I know Danae and I love to talk about and kind of speak on, we both kind of speak on two different things. One is relentless implementation. And then her kind of side that's kind of my bent. And we both kind of talk on that, but her bent is more on, how to love your entrepreneur. And it's a great balance that we have. But I think the biggest thing is that a lot of people in the multifamily, and for those of you who don't know what multifamily is, it's basically just apartment complexes, usually 5 units or more. But to be able to buy these apartment complexes, there's a lot of people that get the education and they go through the process of learning how to do this, but they lack the gumption, if you will, to be able to really relentlessly implement, to be able to get that first deal done and can really take themselves to the next level. And I know a lot of these people that are learning the multifamily space are, W-2 employees. And so they're doing this on the nights and their weekends and things like that. And I've talked to a lot of them, and there's a lot of them that come up with excuse after excuse after excuse as to why they're not doing something, and they're not taking action. Well, I work a full-time job. Well, that's no excuse. I mean, you got to sacrifice sometimes as an entrepreneur, your nights and your weekends and things like that. You've got to get to the next level. So, you have to make sure, and I'm sure you probably tackle that some as well in your program, that you gotta, one, have a mentor that can really slap you upside the head every once in a while and say, get back in the game.
That's exactly right. And I think that, some people get so frustrated because they think they have to do it all on their own. And we've been able to develop it where people are getting involved in deals, and you're buying a business. So there are different people, just like a startup, different people that are part of that business. So if you're really good at something, whether it's maybe you can raise capital, or maybe you have a high net worth and liquidity, or maybe you can find deals, or, underwrite deals and, do analysis, get really, really good at something. And that will become attractive to other people, and you'll get involved in more and more deals because of that. And I think that people try to do it on their own. And I understand people have some people have a bad sense for, so-called mentors or gurus. And I used to kind of as well, but I think it's really, they haven't found the right one yet. And I didn't either. And I found one. He wasn't one of the real estate, but he helped me in a lot of other areas. And he's been phenomenal. So just stick with it and, get good at something. And you have to get out there. People are like, oh, I can't raise money. Well, do you go to events? Do you go to meetups? Do you, whatever it may be? And no, I don't do any of that stuff. I sit at home basically, right? It's like, well, you're not going to raise money sitting at home, generally speaking. So get out there, get in the game and start, taking action. Or that's fine. Maybe it's not for you, but, stop, like to your point, stop talking about all the reasons. I worked 80, 85 hours a week when I started doing larger multifamily. No joke. That was in my IT business. And I still got out there and did it. How, I don't really know exactly, but I was able to.
Wow.
And, so it was, and that's kind of the reason I did it really was because my IT business was so challenging. I couldn't shut it off. I had projects all over the world, and I literally ignored my wife and slept 3 hours a night, and it caused a lot of problems. So that was my why. I had to do something differently if I wanted to, if you want to say survive family wise. And as a result of that, my wife and I, Tamil, work full time, 100% together, and it's phenomenal. It's like, it's awesome for us. So it's great.
Well, I'm sure that, my wife and your wife could talk about many stories together, I'm sure, about how to love your entrepreneur.
Yeah, sure.
Mark, talk just a little bit about a strategy, or maybe a couple of strategies that you use whenever you're facing a tough decision.
Oh man, get counsel. I mean, there's no pride in being in a tough spot. I mean, if you sit there and you think, well, I'm going to figure this one out on my own, you might, but I would say have people, that are in your life, business, spiritual, whatever it may be, that you can rely upon and bounce ideas off them. It is amazing to me how much better something is. I don't care if you're building an application, you're buying an apartment complex, you have problems in the marriage, whatever it may be, getting the appropriate counsel and usually more than one person to give you some feedback, that will just open up a lot of ideas and a lot of potential solutions that you never would have come up on your own.
Well, one thing I wanted to touch on here, as you were talking about, making tough decisions and finding, somebody that you can talk to and discuss these tough decisions, kind of talk to us a tiny bit about how to counteract the negativity from other people. Because I know, you've had that, and I want to know kind of how you were able to mitigate that and how you continue to mitigate that.
Yeah. So it was probably tougher for me before. I'm definitely, I found early on in my career, I found my self-worth in my work. I just did. And that's why I worked, so much like that. And I want a people, pleaser and all those things. I still want to please people. But the fact is that there are just people out there. I mean, even now that we get a little bit more on the social and we get a little more traction that way, people kind of hear about us, and, people will post like stupid things on Facebook, like, oh, you guys are greedy because you buy apartments. It's like, what are you talking about? So we don't respond to them. Right. But the fact is I've gotten to the point that I know what we're doing. Our heart's in the right place. I think as long as your motive is to help other people, and forget the money aside, because that's short-sighted. But if your goal is to help other people and what you're doing is to help people, and you're doing what you say you're going to do. So if I say I'm going to do something and I do that, I don't really care anymore what people say. It's the 1 in 1,000, right? It really is. But you have to have tough skin if you're going to be an entrepreneur. You just do. And people are going to tell you no. People are going to tell you maybe it's a bad idea. Just keep going and going. And kind of your point, be patient and persistent. It'll pay off for sure.
Mark, do you have a book that you could recommend to our audience that has maybe helped you in the tough decisions that you faced?
Book, book for tough decisions. That's a good question, actually. I don't know if I ever read a book just for tough decisions. Read a lot of different books, and the Bible has a lot of good things in Proverbs for tough decisions and things like that. But I don't think I've ever read a book directly for tough decisions. Maybe I should read a book for tough decisions.
Maybe a book that has affected the way you think or you approach your business.
Well, I think I don't want to be the default, but Rich Dad Poor Dad really, for me, when I read a couple times in a row, changed my mindset completely, the way I thought of things, because there was nobody in my family. My dad had 13 kids in his family, and I have 6 siblings. There was nobody in my family doing anything with business. So that did, Rich Dad Poor Dad opened my eyes completely to think differently than I ever thought before, and that anyone ever taught me before. That book changed me more than anything else as far as to get out there. I always kind of had an entrepreneur mindset. Both my brother and I did. Twin brother, and I don't know why. I think it was really more a driver because I wanted to have more than what we had growing up. But Rich Dad Poor Dad is probably the number one book I've read that changed my mindset.
Well, kind of shifting gears here a little bit, can you tell us the most exciting place that you have traveled or item that you have purchased with the money that you have made up to this point in your career as an entrepreneur?
Yeah, so I don't purchase a lot, definitely for myself. We just moved into a new house about 2 weeks ago. So that's good. Kids and Tamil love it. I do now too. We were actually in a walkable community before that for 4 years. So we could literally just walk downstairs and go to every restaurant and grocery store. And so it was a big shift there, but we did that. And then probably the best vacation I've ever taken was when Tamil and I went to Hawaii. We 12 days, went to 3 different islands, and that was probably the best vacation taken. But it's probably one of those areas people say you need to celebrate your wins. And that's an area that I somewhat am not very good at doing, frankly. I'm on to the next deal before I take a breath to really say, yeah, it was good. We actually closed a deal, and we're closing about a half a year. We're doing about 8 deals in about 6 months this year, which is a lot of deals. So I don't take the break to realize that, hey, we just did 8 deals, in half a year. So it's something I need to work on, but I would say the house and the Hawaii vacation were the best.
Well, I hear that Hawaii has some really good spots for you to set up an event. And Danae and I love to speak on stages, yeah. So you can invite us as well. We'll just have a party out there.
Well, I'm sure when Tamil listens to this, she'll start looking at in Maui. That's where we go back to. So that's where it'll be.
Well, then you get to write the whole thing off at the same time, and it doesn't even matter if anybody shows up. You can just still just write it off.
Right. Now we are doing a cruise with our group. So we have a cruise this coming week. We're leaving for just a 4-day cruise, but it was really more to help develop the community and people to be able to, bond with each other. We're bringing our kids, other people are bringing their kids. So it's a cool environment. It's 95% fun, and we'll have some education, but most of it's going to be fun.
Well, I won't tell anybody that there's any fun involved. It's all business that we can write the whole thing off. So what's the next thing on your bucket list that you want to get done?
I want to get, I do want to get an older car, actually, muscle car. I've always loved cars growing up, and I've had a couple, but not for a very long, long time. So I haven't had anything for 25 years. And my next thing would be to get an older muscle car. Do you have one in mind? I have several in mind, actually, and that's the problem, but it'll be either a 63 to 65 vet, or I really like, people don't know them very well, a 70 to 73 Trans Am I like as well. They didn't make a lot of those, and I have some ideas how I would make it different than any other ones out there, but it's those are probably, but I love so many cars, old cars from 63 to 73 are the 10 best years in my opinion.
Sounds to me like it's another tough decision.
It's a tough decision, and then it's like, what color are you going to paint and everything else. So, I might have to buy it already. I almost bought one actually already done. I'm like, I'd do it myself. I'm like, not to make all the decisions myself.
Well, Mark, we do really appreciate you coming on the podcast with us today. How can the listeners reach out to you and start to follow you a little bit more, or maybe get some more education on the multifamily space with you?
Sure. My email is Mark, M-A-R-K, at thinkmultifamily.com. So Mark at thinkmultifamily.com is the best way to reach out to me. Love talking with people. And we hear a lot of the same questions people struggle with. And I definitely have some ideas and can share those with the different people as well.
Well, thanks again for being with us, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate it.
Do you want to nominate a highly successful entrepreneur or real estate investor to be a guest on this show? Email us at dan@toughdecisions.net. Help us by spreading the word about our show with your friends. And also take time right now to subscribe and leave a review on iTunes, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, or your favorite platform. You've been listening to The Tough Decisions Show.